This podcast episode is brought to you by OWC, Whisper Room, Spectra 1964, PreSonus Studio One, and Jay-Z microphones. So get ready to rock.
I started learning like Muay Thai and some other things. Like I love all things martial art. There's a quote that Bruce Lee said, "If you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done." That encompasses a lot of things in the music world. I love just doing things. And sometimes they're not good. Sometimes they're great. If you just like continually do something, you know, whether you're practicing or recording, just don't spend too much time overthinking it.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. If you feel like the fast pace of computer tech has made your studio Mac obsolete, then think again. OWC is your personal studio tech for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs perfect for recording and mixing. Why ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with the Mac you've already got? Learn how to supercharge your studio and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC.com so that you can focus on making great music. If you're sick of bothering the neighbors when you're trying to record your music or ruining your recordings with outside noises, but you're not ready to spend a fortune on permanent studio construction yet, then consider getting a Whisper Room ISO booth for your studio. Whisper Room offers an instant solution for a comfortable, quiet, ventilated, portable ISO booth with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Adam Bokesch, a Nashville writer, recording engineer, and producer. He has worked as a touring and session drummer, as well as a studio owner, engineer, and music producer. He's worked with many artists, including Emily West, Shelley Wright, Drake White, Jon McLaughlin, Dave Barnes, Gabe Dixon, Marie Hines, Milktooth, and the Daybreaks. He also pursues his solo artist career, writing and recording music for film and TV, including movies starring James Franco, Abigail Spencer, Wes Robinson, and others. His music has been featured in Paste magazine and used in national campaigns with Microsoft, ESPN, Ameritrade, MTV, Sony, Triumph Motorcycles, Tesla Motors, and the World Wildlife Foundation. For my introduction to Adam, it was clear that he's also super passionate about the electronic side of music production too, and loves vintage keyboards. I met Adam over at Pentaveret Studios, which is also home of Haley McLean and Bobby Holland and a bunch of other guys who are all been on the podcast and more to come. So I knew we were in for some cool stuff. So I'm looking forward to geeking out on some synth talk today, as well as everything else studio related. Please welcome Adam Bokesch to Recording Studio Rockstars. You ready to rock, Adam?
I sure am, man. I'm happy to be here.
All right, dude. Good to have you here at the studio. Welcome to the podcast. You know, I've done a little bit of an introduction, but give us a little bit more of an introduction in your own words to how you got started music and like, how'd you end up at such a cool studio like Pentaveret and making all these cool records?
Yeah, of course, man. So I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. My family was musicians, so we were always involved in the music side of things since I was just a little kid. I think I got my first drum set when I was like 2 years old. And then I got another drum set when I was 6. And so I still play
drums
that.
First.
Drums first,
drums last.
Drums first, and probably drums last. Yeah.
Nice.
And I still play that drum set today. The one I got when I was 6. It's 1971, like Slingerland. It's a beautiful kit. So,
sweet.
Yeah. So from Ohio, I went to Youngstown State to study music right out of high school. And then 2 years later, I decided to transfer and come down to Nashville. And that's how I ended up here. So I was playing with a friend of mine that actually went to Belmont here in Nashville and moved back to Youngstown. And that's how I ended up coming back here. Is he wanted to move back to Nashville. And so kind of looked into Belmont myself. And 2007 moved down here. So ever since then, I've been working on just everything from playing to recording. I started off out of college just having a home studio. And then probably 3 years ago, I moved into Pentaveret. Been working on my career ever since then.
So Pentaveret is a really cool place. It's a multi-studio facility.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work for you? Do you have a small studio, a big studio in there? How many studios are you guys able to accommodate? It's really cool.
In Pentaveret, there's 5 rooms. 2 of the rooms share a tracking room. So there's the Studio A, which is where Bobby's in. Studio B, which is Will Pugh's in there, and Bobby kind of is overseeing it. And those both share the tracking room. And then there's 3 other smaller production rooms. And so each of the other 3 rooms do have booths. Like my room does have a vocal booth. And so I'm able to cut vocals and guitars and pretty much, I mean, I've even done some drums and perk stuff in there. It's just, it's a smaller booth, but for what I do, most of that works great. Anytime I do need to record a band, we just go down the hall to the tracking room. So,
Will is another guest that we've had on the podcast. We did a great episode with him, but I think he's actually moved rooms since we did that.
Will's doing a few other things, and so Bobby's kind of been taking over that room, and mainly for booking time and the tracking room and everything. And so, but it's a really great family there. I've really enjoyed the past 3 years I've been there. It's been amazing to see just my career kind of grow by being part of that community.
Yeah. So. It's such a rare thing these days with the studio world. It's like everything's trending towards isolation. And here you guys are creating an environment of community around it, which is really hip. And then of course, Brad Sample's over there too.
Yep.
And Brad, we're coming after you for being on the podcast. He's close.
Heck yeah.
We tried. I think we were one button push away from already having scheduled our interview.
Nice.
So we're going to keep kicking it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what about your studio skill set experience? You started out as a drummer. When did you get into synths and stuff like that?
Sure.
And that sort of stuff?
That's a great question. So I started out as a drummer, and then the band I played with, my first band, it was probably 2000, maybe 1999, like kind of middle school, early high school area for me. I wanted to record. And so my dad had like a old TAC 4-track machine, and we had the
nice going, Dad.
I know, right? It's sitting in our studio right now. It doesn't really work anymore, but
does it have multi-heads? Does it have a
it's 4, mm-hmm.
Ooh, slap.
Slap.
You might be sitting on a gold mine for slap echo, by the way.
It's a beautiful thing, and I've got lots of good memories from it. So I recorded our first demo through that onto cassette tape. And that's ever since then, I've always had a love for recording. In terms of synths and keyboards, that was something that it didn't really come naturally to me. I think I started playing more out of necessity. Just the band that I was in, like we needed some other sounds other than just guitar and bass. And so I had like an old Casio keyboard and would just kind of mess around with some sounds. And I was pretty bad at keyboards. Like I think my dad tried to get me learning when I was younger, and I just wanted to play drums when I was a little kid. But when I was probably 13, 14 is when I started like actually getting into playing keyboards. And ever since then, it's been a process, and I feel like it's become this, like any synth keyboards, like it's just become such a world that I just love living in now. And they grow on me every day. It's been good.
Did you start out with sort of like the vintage synths, and those kind of keyboards? Or did you start out with kind of like the stuff that came inside a DAW? And do you remember the experience of beginning to learn how to record on the computer? I guess maybe
sure.
for you, like what else was there except for recording on a computer? How else would you record?
Yeah. So my dad had a Fender, again, family musician. So there was a bunch of stuff kind of always around. My dad had a Fender Rhodes, which I've got in my room right now. And so that was the first keyboard that I learned to play on, and I would kind of explore that. I think I had some pedals that we messed with, and he had like an old Echoplex, one of those like tape delays.
Yeah, I got one. It's not working at the moment, but it's awesome when it does.
Yeah, right. And so I would like run the Rhodes through that, and that was kind of my first, I guess, adventure in the whole keyboard sound processing world.
I thought you were going to say it was your first signature sound that everybody knew.
Signature sound, yeah. I mean, maybe it was. I don't know, but I just always remember like just always experimenting with like sounds and just the weirdness that these instruments could bring. So
I always like the weirder sound of music,
right?
And recording, the weirder side, the weirder side of sound.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see here. One of the things I like to ask guests on the show is to share an inspirational quote or to tell us about anybody that really inspired you in the recording process.
I love that question. So this is like a little bit outside of the music world, which I think is kind of a cool thing. But I grew up loving all things like martial arts and like old kung fu movies and all. I studied karate for 12, 13 years.
Wow, I'm glad you told me that before I asked the tough questions.
Yeah, right. And to this day, I started like learning like Muay Thai and some other things. Like I love it. I love all things martial arts. So, anyways, there's a quote that Bruce Lee said that I think actually really, I mean, it could encompass a lot of things, but I think especially in the music world. Let's see here. Where is it? Okay, so yeah, he said, if you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done.
Right.
And so I feel like that quote encompasses a lot of things in the music world. I love just like doing things. Like, and sometimes like they're not good. Sometimes they're great. But if you just like continually do something, like if you're, whether you're practicing or recording or anything that you're like going after, just don't spend too much time like overthinking it. And so I really love that quote. I think that's a pretty spot on thing for a lot of music.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me a little bit of something I read from the author Henry Miller, where he was talking about how a first-time author will always blow up their first book in their mind as their huge masterpiece that it's going to be. And he was like, and they always don't understand that their first book is going to be a big pile of shit. It's going to be terrible.
And just be okay with it.
Yeah, it's not till later that it starts to get great. Yeah. And it's that same thinking with what you're saying when, Bruce Lee's quote, it's just like, just get started because it's probably going to suck anyway. It doesn't matter. Don't sweat it. Might be great.
It might be great. And that's the goal. Like even like releasing music or finishing a song, like, I mean, it's difficult to finish a piece of music from writing it to recording it to mixing it to mastering it and then putting it out in the world. Like it's a very difficult thing. And so I think you can overthink that entire process to the point where like you won't finish something or you won't put something out. And a lot of it could just be just keep things moving. Just like, you're gonna start like moving that wheel and stirring the pot.
Yeah, I totally get that right now. That hits close to home because I've derailed my own record making process. I started a record in January, and then 8, 9, 10 months later. Let's put it this way. I started it, and then within like 4 months, I had gotten through vocals on 5 songs and comped and done all kinds of things. And then the next, 6 months were just kind of lost in a vacuum because I didn't come back to it. Yeah, it was about scheduling and stuff like that. There's always a reason. There's always an excuse.
Yeah, time is a thing with it for sure. But yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot from that because it's. I mean, I struggle with that sometimes where you just let something sit for a while and. It's best to just like keep things moving in your head, no matter what you're doing. Just keep going.
Trucking forward, and I feel like a good solution to trucking forward is often like if the next step seems daunting, take a smaller step. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's my quote. You can quote me, Rox. Just like figure out what like come on, dude. What the hell step can you take then?
Yeah, sure.
Figure that out and do that. and just do it as soon as you can,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want the critical details from your microphone to get through to your recording, and the Spectra 1964 101 amplifier provides just that. With unequaled headroom, low noise, and a linear output, irrespective of transient audio peaks. Used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, and The Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, and John Lennon, Spectra 1964 brings that same incredible sound to your studio with the new STX 600 mic pre with built-in comp limiter. Start making classic records again at Spectra1964.com. If you want a digital audio workstation that will give life to your music, from sketching a new idea to composing, editing, mixing, and mastering a finished record, then you want Studio One from PreSonus. Studio One is easy to use with intuitive drag-and-drop simplicity, making it great for beginners yet flexible and powerful for experienced producers. Whether creating beats, recording a band, or composing a blockbuster film soundtrack, you will find everything you need to create your masterpiece. Download your free version of Studio One Prime and get started now at PreSonus, wherever sound takes you. There's a guy who teaches, I think David Allen, he has a whole productivity organizational brand called Getting Things Done. And there's like compartmentalizing things. Like if it's something that can be done in 3 minutes or less, do it right now.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it. Maybe we just got to sometimes just figure out like, well, what? That's actually a pretty good analogy, because how long is most pop songs? Three and a half.
Yeah,
okay. So
right. Yeah.
if it's 3.5, you might have to wait a couple of minutes to do it. No, but just do it now,
They're getting shorter.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Cool. Well, tell us a little bit more about your room and your setup with your studio over at Pentaveret.
So my room, I've got, I use Mac. I run Pro Tools. I like in terms of software, I like what Native Instruments puts out. I use a lot of their software stuff. It's really, really solid. I like everything UAD. I use a lot of Universal Audio plugins. I do some stuff with like the Acoustica audio plugins. Those are really awesome.
Yeah, those are pretty cool.
They have a really nice vibe to them.
They do some interesting modeling of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's similar to the UAD idea, but they've got like something unique going. And so one of their plugins is one of my favorites that we'll talk about.
You can name drop it right now. Tell us about it.
The Taupe, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Taupe or Tape or something. It's like
T-A-U-P?
Mm-hmm.
P-E, yeah, Taupe, I think is how I pronounce it. It's a color, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is it like a brownish purple or something? I don't know what it is.
The plugin's like black and red though, so I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Anyways, Taupe. It's an incredible plugin. So huge. Yeah, I guess shout out to them, because it's a really cool, magical plugin, and I really enjoy it.
I think I have. I've got a few plugins of theirs. I remember some. I really need to re-look at them. Mm-hmm. But DW Fern, I think they make his Red series.
Yep.
And then there's like, I've got one called Gold and something else.
Yeah, the Gold.
They do a great job of like having beat up, scratched up looking.
I know, right? You just kind of, you could smell it, like it just has that like thing to it. So.
Now I do seem to remember that they can be fairly processor.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Right? I know normally when I'm running a few other, some are heavier than others, and I could get probably 2 or 3 instances of Taupe running. But then, you start getting into some RAM, depending on what your processing is, which mine's like, it's fairly capable, and I still get some buffer issues. And so,
well, the funny thing is, in this day and age, we think of that as like, oh man, only 3 plugins.
Yeah, dude,
how many years I used to make records where like 3-4 plugins we were maxed out anyway,
totally.
In the early Pro Tools LE days.
Right.
And the solution was always make some decisions on it, process that track, turn them all off, bounce the track. And that's easy to do with Pro Tools now.
Yeah, especially the new version. And I think, if I had to say anything about them, I honestly treat them like hardware. You print the sound, and that's the sound you get, and that's what makes it a special thing.
Yeah.
You don't have a million, plugins running. You just have the sounds that you need from them. And so, I kind of imagine like I have a rack mount of taupe. I've got 1 or 2, and that's what you get. And that's great.
Right on. Well, let's see. Let's keep moving forward.
Sure.
Synths. I mean, I want to talk about all that stuff.
Yeah.
You talked about native instruments stuff. So what are some fun tools that you like to use over in that world?
Yeah.
And then is there anything we should be talking about as far as appropriate ways, some of the challenges of just simply using instruments in Pro Tools as opposed to plugins? I think you need a lot more RAM, right? Or not?
Yeah, I think, I've run into a few issues with some of those, depending on which VST you're using. Most of the native instrument stuff is pretty friendly. Like, I don't normally ever have big issues with them. I've used some like Roland Cloud, for example. Like, it's amazing what they do. Love it. I do feel like sometimes I am running into the RAM issues with their plugins, and they do have like light version. You could kind of like enable like a light version of it, and that does seem to help.
Yeah, so, maybe actually the RAM aspect is only mostly pertinent to using big samples as part of the sound, right?
Yeah,
if it's
could be
generating the sound, then it's the CPU speed that helps it, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that technical stuff that honestly, like, I'm not probably the person to talk about it. But
dude, I've been making records for 25 years. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm pretty nerdy about that stuff, but I just want stuff that works and sounds good and keeps the flow moving.
All right, so let me ask you a tough question that would piss you off. Is not the question, but the thing, the context of the question.
Yeah.
The topic is latency.
Sure.
One of the things that can be a real challenge for me using instrument plugins in Pro Tools is like, I'll go pull up something. I'm like, cool. I go hit the keys and I'm like, what is going on? That doesn't feel right, or it starts getting weird. Is that an issue? Have you found some good workarounds for that? How do you deal with that and avoid it?
Well, probably, some of the main causes, and other than just the VST being pretty heavy, like if you have a lot of other plugins running, like especially on your master bus, like that'll kind of that'll hog things up pretty quickly.
Right. Well, the master bus itself will actually put latency on all the audio that's going in and coming back, even if you're playing a real instrument.
So the first thing probably is to make sure that you're not hogging that side of it up, and and I'll sometimes see that happen, but most of the time I don't experience latency. I have again, I don't use a ton of plugins. And so maybe that's probably helping, but I'll have a buffer issue before I have latency. So,
right. Well, isn't the buffer the latency solution and problem anyway?
Yeah, right. Exactly. I guess maybe it's a little bit of a catch-22, but yeah, it's I normally can run at 1024, and I still on my computer.
That's the buffer setting.
The buffer setting, yeah. And it'll be pretty solid in terms of the way that my computer works. And so,
that doesn't cause, when you hit the keyboard, to have a real like awkward delay before the sound comes out. I can't remember I feel like Pro Tools may have solved that a while back, where it's like there's immediacy to it gives priority to the MIDI or something.
Right. Yeah. And it could be that sort of technical thing, but yes, normally I just run all of my sessions at 1024. If I do track audio, because I use an Apollo, I'm running, I'll just monitor through the console specifically. And
for
so
tracking, for the band tracking,
yes,
right.
Exactly. And so in my room, yes, I'll have a Pro Tools track muted, and then I'm actually monitoring through console, which then there's no latency in that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know there is one trick that it took me a long time to discover, which is, let's say you've got stuff on your stereo bus, you got plugins going, and that's causing latency, thousands of samples or something across just the stereo bus. A solution to that is to put that, instead of on the master output of Pro Tools, put that on an AUX track in your session, and then route all your instruments and like all the individual tracks to that. I'll call it mix bus or something.
Yeah, sure. If you do want to monitor that stuff.
And then route that to the master bus. That way, whatever your newest overdub is doing, you don't go to the mix bus with that one. You go straight to the master bus, and then it helps avoid that latency.
No, that's a good workaround for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a it's definitely one of those things you don't want to run into when you're trying to make music.
Yeah, it could be.
You got to figure it out.
It could be frustrating if you're sitting there trying to play some music and you're running into these technical issues. Nobody wants to do that. So,
what are some native instruments, synths, and samplers and stuff like that you've been excited about right now?
So obviously their Contact, the sampler is great. They have so many third-party instruments that you can use to run through Contact, which it's a really powerful instrument. I love it. I use
so Contact is basically, it's like a shell. You put that plugin on, and then within the shell, you can load up a whole ton of sounds or something, right?
Yep. So if you just want a really high end, like just piano sound or organ, like they have like all the native instruments, but then there's also third party ones that you can load in. So I love using Contact. It's great. They also have some really cool other instruments like FM8 I use. It's a really cool FM frequency modulation synthesizer. And it's a beautiful thing. And
hey, why don't we pause right there for a sec? What is FM? What's frequency modulated synthesis?
Man, I may be the wrong guy to get into that.
Right. What does it sound like to you?
So originally the FM synthesis kind of was made popular by like the DX7. And so a lot of those sounds, that's kind of where it's kind of coming from. But you could go pretty mad scientist and all of that stuff. So
as far as I remember, the FM synthesis is you have an oscillator that's making a tone, and then you have a second oscillator that is modifying the first oscillator. But I forget what it's modifying, the pitch or the volume?
There's a few different things working in tandem to kind of create those sounds and oscillations. But it's really fun. Sounds great. It's pretty inspiring, and I love a lot of those older tones, like a lot of the 80s sounds and stuff. Like I do a lot of that in my production, whether it's pop music or like ambient cinematic stuff. Like I kind of always am kind of utilizing those sounds. And so,
well, when you got here, we were doing a studio tour and I showed you my keyboard aptly named the Roland EP9, which I have named Rolando. And Rolando, you just started immediately like cooking up a Stranger Things theme, which I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's a good thing, man. It's a good thing. So,
and I love hearing any kind of that vintage synth stuff coming back and, recirculating in sound.
Yep.
Now I'm also a super fan of electronic sounds. I've loved a lot of stuff, EDM, I still think dubstep is cool. So, I don't know what the rest of the world thinks at this point, but
yeah, it's an art, man. The guys that are able to do that, it's pretty amazing. Like it's some of the hardest hitting music out there. And, I've definitely kind of toyed with those sounds a little bit depending on the production, but I haven't really gotten into the full on like dubstep world. But it is an art form and, you have to, those guys are talented at what they're doing. And, and it's funny, like, I've watched some stuff with like Deadmau5 and whatnot. And like, honestly, like a lot of those guys don't really know much about music. They're just like moving around MIDI notes.
Cool.
And they just know what sounds cool. And like, that's what it is, man. So.
So a recent synth that I discovered that's in that, virtual world is Steve Duda's Serum. It's a wavetable synth from Transfer Records or Xfer.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that one?
Yeah, I was about to mention that next because honestly, outside of Contact, that's probably my go-to virtual synth.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think if you listen to any of the Daybreaks records, a lot of it they're either hardware synthesizers or Serum.
Dream Queen. That was one of the tracks that you shared with me. And immediately I hear that. You know what Steve described on a video I was watching? He described it's a synth sound that has what he called a pluck on it. And I heard that a little bit in that. Is that
that's Serum. Yeah.
Yes.
That's Serum. That's
like a badass.
Yeah. That track I think the bass is Serum. There may be a few pads and a couple leads that are all Serum. I think the rest is the Prophet 6.
Oh, cool, man. Well, we want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
And just as a side note, I got so excited about it. I found the Xfer Records website and I tried to drop in a little contact form email to Steve Duda, see if I could get him to come on the podcast. I'm coming after you, Steve.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to hear that for sure.
I would too. Yeah. I don't know if he's got the time for it, but if he does, that'd be great. Are you sick of microphones that make your music sound harsh and brittle? The new Amethyst mic by Jay-Z Microphones brings you a rich, warm tone with perfect detail using the golden capsule technology. Resulting from 30 years of microphone design, the Amethyst is hand-built using carefully selected parts with Class A discrete circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and an advanced shock mount to make sure your recordings sound awesome. This is my voice on the Amethyst right now. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the Amethyst mic at jzmic.com. Do you feel comfortable just break down a description of what Serum is? Like, what does it look like on your screen? What is some stuff you do with it?
Well, I think the coolest thing about Serum, and this could be a deep conversation, but I think the coolest thing about Serum is that it's its own thing. It's not trying to necessarily replicate another synth. And so, which that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's plenty of amazing VSTs that are like again, the Rolling Cloud, like they are making an exact replication of the Juno 106 or the Roland D50 or the Jupiter 8.
Right.
And
which is great that people are doing that.
It's really cool because, that makes those synths accessible for us. And so, because not everybody can own a Jupiter 8, I think for me, and I don't know if it's necessarily because I do have access to some of these synths that when I sit down and like try and play a kind of just like an exact like model on the computer with my MIDI controller, sometimes I don't feel that instant connection.
Yeah.
And, again, this is something I'm still kind of like exploring and working out. I mean, every day, like there's something new that you're working through. But I think that's what's kind of cool about Serum is it's not necessarily trying to be something else. It's trying to be the best original, VST synth. And so you can kind of feel that. And it's got its own sound. It's got its own thing. There's so many cool things you could do with it. Just multiple oscillators and detuning and like the noise options. Like there's like you could trigger an air can, and it's stuff like that. Like it kind of does its own thing. And
I think you can actually import your own samples of noise and make that the noise.
It's pretty amazing. And so,
I feel like we should break down some basics. We don't have to be experts on any of this stuff, but my understanding is that wavetable synthesis is starting with maybe a sample. I guess it doesn't have to be a sample, but maybe it's starting with a sample of some other sound and it's breaking it down into little chunks. And each chunk is a little window of that, the waveform of that sound. And then
in terms of a sampler, yes.
Yeah, and then each one of those chunks can be looped. So you could basically do like a snapshot in the middle of some other sound and loop that.
Right.
Or you can kind of scroll through the sound, or you can go back and forth, or do all kinds of cool things.
Tons of possibilities.
It gives you this great 3D waterfall graph so you can see how it looks.
Yep.
And then there's just crazy routing stuff in there. You got multiple oscillators. You can
and once you blend those together with that sample and these other oscillators, and what you could do with modulating each one of those, that's what kind of creates those new textures that you don't really hear often. And
I watched a video where a guy took a kalimba sample, which is just the little thumb piano, the African thumb piano, played a single note in, and then turned that into a wavetable, and then reconstructed the sound from the wavetable, and it sounded so awesome. It's like this perfect EDM kind of synth.
Yeah, and sometimes you need that to, not just preset scrolling, but like just creating something that you kind of had some sort of connection with, and then it becomes your own. Yeah. And it's pretty awesome.
And I guess that literally does have a pluck. This little thumb.
It does.
On a piano.
Yep. Yep.
Right on. So some other synths, I used to actually have a Roland SH101 here.
Oh, nice.
Which is a really fun synth.
Yep.
Sadly, I had to let it go one Christmas to make it through December, but it's all right. Whoever's got it now, I hope you're doing well with it.
Nice.
I'm not sure if I've seen the SH101 come out as a plugin. It must be out there, right?
So yeah, Rolling Cloud does do a model of the SH101. They also have the Boutique series SH101, I believe. And so there's two different versions of it, which, the Boutique series are actually pretty cool. I've got the...
What's the Boutique series? Is that like where they make the mini hardware to accompany the software?
I think they do. I may not have all of them down, but so the SH1, they have the JP08, which is like a Jupiter model.
Right.
They have the D05, which is a Roland D50. And then they have, I think they have a new Juno 106/60 model. Maybe another one that I'm missing, but yeah, they're all like these little, like 1 foot by maybe 6-inch little boxes. And you can control them from any MIDI controller. You just, plug into them. And
oh, yeah, right. Okay, so it's like a little miniature synth that you can sit on your desktop.
Yeah,
and then you just use a full-size keyboard to control
it. So it saves space, and also you kind of get a little bit of hands-on. Like they're a little small, but you get kind of interaction with them. And you're able to actually have, depending on which one you're using, like actual like parts to them rather than just a plug-in.
And there's actual knobs and stuff.
Exactly. And so
I feel like that's such an important part of synthesis and actually playing any instrument is being able to manipulate more things for expression,
Yeah. You just have more of a connection with the instrument.
Yeah. So now what about using Serum, for example, with so you have to use a MIDI controller for that, or you could be programming things.
Right. Yeah.
Have you found that in order to use a virtual synth like that, you really need to take the time to custom route and connect certain knobs to certain things? Or do you find that typically like just the default connection between the knobs on your MIDI keyboard and what's in there is usually like, no, this is great. I can totally get expressive and make some cool stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no doubt that you can make some extremely expressive things out of Serum. It's got a sound to it, and there's plenty of presets and packs that people make that you can download or buy, and so I've done that a lot. Like I love finding what people are creating, and then
those are like people's synth settings, just sounds.
Yeah, just and especially like depending on what you want. Like I love like retro synthwave music, and so there's a ton of really cool packs that you can buy, and you can load those into Serum, and then you have like the start to your palette, and then you can tweak from there. You can mess with them and do things that, it's going to just be, closer to your sound that you want. And so, but it's great to explore all that and just hear what other people are doing with them too. So,
well, that's awesome. Yeah. How about the world of drum machines? Has that been something exciting for you too?
Well, the thing about drum machines, being a drummer, like there's always this like, drum machines have no soul sort of thing, but I love them. I really do. I think it's such a cool thing. And like the sounds that all these amazing drum machines have, like it's just instant feel and vibe. I even sometimes, maybe this is kind of an 80s thing that I do, but I almost, when I'm tracking drums, depending on the song, I love almost like trying to recreate the feel of drum machines. I feel like some of that, world like becomes, something that you want to seek after sometimes, especially in like pop music or that sort of thing. Like I love trying to kind of recreate that like feel, like just like how tight and like, crunchy it could be and stuff.
Are you using like outboard analog drum machines or like, stuff that's not in the computer, or you mostly find yourself using stuff that are plugins?
Yeah. So I mainly use Machine. I don't own any.
Oh, cool.
I don't own any hardware vintage drum machines. I had like a Roland kit once, and it was kind of fun, but I kind of I have my acoustic drums, and then I use Machine, and it's doing pretty much everything that I need. I know that Roland's kind of done some cool recreations and like reissues of the 808s and 909s and stuff like that. And I think they're great, especially for like live stuff. I think that could be really cool. But for the studio, I find that Machine really can nail all the tones and like the feel and everything that you want to get out of a vintage drum machine.
But it's sample-based. Machine is basically sample-based. So you have to have the right 808 kick sample that you want to use on a song, right?
Exactly.
Do you sometimes find that you get frustrated, like, I wish I could just tweak this, or something like that, whereas, using the sample rather than the real thing is frustrating?
Maybe a bit. I think that you can still tweak it pretty good. Like the stuff that I'm able to do in Machine with those sounds, like, you could do on an actual like 808 drum machine or whatnot. Like you could do like pitch, you could do, probably even a little bit more. And so I don't think I've ever really had a time that I felt necessarily like frustrated or I guess limited by what Machine can do. And I have, the sounds and samples from like all these drum machines and whatnot.
Yeah.
I will say one thing though. I do use I have a old Omnichord.
Oh, sweet. I love the Omnichord.
Yeah. And it's, we could talk more about that instrument, but I find myself sometimes tracking the drum machine loops from the Omnichord and put them into songs and then messing with those sounds in tandem to Machine. And so just because it does have a thing to it. So
yeah, I like that idea a lot of using Machine for manipulating and controlling and programming, but also like considering it to be like, a camera where you could take a snapshot of some other sound outside, bring it in. Kind of like, taking a sample of some recording and building a wavetable out of it in Serum and come up with your own sounds.
Yeah.
Often like the hybrid of doing that plus using, some of the, just a good old great sounding sample and blending it is a great way to get a killer sound on a record.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. We do, I love like blending those sounds sometimes, just like it really kind of creates something new. And pitch shift is a huge part of that. Taking a kick drum and like pitch shifting it down, or a snare drum pitch shifting it up, or whatever each way, like that kind of creates this new palette and texture, layers, all that stuff. Like it really, adds to a unique sound when it comes to drums.
So you just got a new keyboard. Tell us about the one you just got.
Oh wow. Well, yeah. So it's funny. I don't even know too much about this synth. It's an Ensoniq EPS, the classic version, not the 16 Plus, which there's more about the 16 Plus out there.
Oh, I remember what the synth was before the sampler. It was the Mirage.
The Mirage, yeah. Yes. And so it runs off of floppy disks. The samples are all stored on floppy disks. And so yeah, it's new to me. I just got it the other day. And so I'm interested to really get to know it. And, but I love collecting instruments and synths and these keyboards that just really kind of take you out of the norm. They're conversation pieces. They have a certain feel to them in the room when you're working on music that, you don't get by just like having just a MIDI controller or something sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. They cause you to just get started, like Bruce Lee said. Whereas sometimes just getting started in a virtual instrument where you don't know what to do can feel like just flipping through presets, and you're like, I'm sick of flipping through presets.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, because we have unlimited resources nowadays. We have a million,
which is really the worst.
Unlimited
is like the kiss of death.
It's not necessarily a good thing. I think some of my favorite synthesizers or keyboards are the ones that have, a few different sounds, and like that's what it is. Like that's the sound you get. I have a Yamaha SK20. It came out in 1981.
Nice.
And it's got organ, strings, and polysynth. And you can manipulate each one of those three sounds, but those are the three sounds you get. And it's become so versatile, but it's just those three things.
Do you really want the neighbors banging on the ceiling when you're trying to rehearse or record your music? Do outside noises and computer fans get into your studio mic and ruin your recordings? You could book a pro studio to record every time, but that would add up quickly, and doing permanent construction to soundproof your studio could easily cost up to $100,000. And you can't take that with you when you eventually move the studio. Don't you wish there was an easy solution right now? Whisper Room ISO Booths offers a simple way to install a comfortable, quiet, ventilated ISO booth in your studio with easy line of sight for recording vocals or even drums in a variety of sizes. For 30 years, Whisper Room has been solving studio isolation needs with ISO booths that are shippable, portable, and can be assembled in an afternoon. Now you can get pro vocal recordings right in your home studio, practice whenever you want, and start using real guitar amps again. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com. If you're using a Mac in your recording studio and you're tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly, then Otherworld Computing is the solution for you. OWC can help keep your existing Mac and studio current and relevant so that you can make great music. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac, you can get the most mileage out of your studio with OWC. Offering a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49, there's no need to get frustrated when you can achieve the speed to create and the capacity to dream at OWC.com. Interesting that the Yamaha came out with an SK series. Maybe a sample or keyboard or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, it makes me wonder, I'm like, did you guys, pay attention to Casio over here and just had the SK1,
they've got an
the
SK1,
SK5?
Yeah, right. I think they had it was the SK10 first. That was just organ and strings. And then the SK20 came out that added the polysynth. And so it's kind of one of those like rare, like you don't see too many people using them. I ended up finding out about it because one of my favorite bands, Sigaros, used it on one of their earlier records. I think it was specifically the organ sound, but yeah, I just saw it on Craigslist for a couple $100, and but yeah, I don't think there's anybody has a VST for it, not that I know of. But yeah, it's one of those instruments. One day, maybe. I don't know. I hope no one touches it. It's a special thing. It's a special thing. So.
All right. So, quick reference. When I heard that you had gotten, an EPS 16, the Ensoniq, and I knew you were a drummer, I was like, I just immediately thought of Matt Mahaffey, who's a friend and been a guest on the show, who's also a drummer, and like his first keyboard was that EPS 16 Plus, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And it got great sounds. So, and then you just mentioned the Omnichord, and it all spun together. So there is a killer video. Do you know Matt? Do you know who he is?
I don't know.
Do you know the
him.
band Self? You ever hear
I've
that?
heard of Self. Yeah, okay, I don't know Matt though.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to encourage. I'm making a note to myself to leave that in the YouTube playlist for you rock stars too. So it's a buddy who has a great video where he's playing Back in Black on drums with an Omnichord that's played through like a Marshall amp stack.
Amazing
solo, and it's awesome. So I'll make a note to leave that in the link.
Great.
So all right, next question. Back to you. You've got all these synths. Before we take the break, let us know, what are some thoughts about how do you have all these cool outboard synths? They don't all do everything. So you can't just pull up one and be like, I can just do whatever's needed for this song.
Yep.
How do you have those in a studio along with virtual synths, along with somebody you're working with, so that it all is easy to use it as soon as you want, reach over, try it out, experiment, bail on it, or go, that was awesome.
Yep.
What tips do you have for that in a studio setup?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I'm still learning honestly. It's in the space I have, like I don't have a huge studio, or at least specifically my room is not that big of a space. And so but I do know that I have a way that I run things, like just cable management, logistics are one thing.
We love that shit.
Yeah.
That is not geeky at all. We love talking about cable management.
I mean, that's honestly like, I love like keeping my room organized and clean, and cable management is huge. Like you've got to stay organized in the studio.
But give us what is the back of do you have your keyboards hooked up all the time so that you can just turn it on and start playing it and feed it into Pro Tools, for example?
Yes, powered up, yes. Okay. And sometimes I swap some out. Like me and my studio roommate, Bobby Holland, we share synths a lot. And so like sometimes he'll have, like he's got the Sub 37 Moog Prophet 6 in his room, and I'll have a few random things in my room, and sometimes we'll swap out. But normally, everything that I use often is powered up, and then I'll just have cables that are just basically ready to roll. And so if I have a sound in mind, or if I want the SK20 or the Casio tone or something, like it's just easily plugged in and you're rolling.
So it doesn't necessarily have to already be plugged in. It just needs to be there, and you can just plug a cable into the output or a MIDI into the input. Mm-hmm. So that would indicate that you want to set up your keyboards in your control room in such a way that you can actually get to the back of them, right?
Yeah. And so, they're all accessible for me. I like being able to, I don't want to have stuff in the closet or something, because then I just don't really, I'll know it's there, but I just don't necessarily want it to be like a burden in the workflow.
It sounds like a project to set it up and turn it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing with me with something as simple as tube mics. Mm-hmm. I insist on leaving the tube mics up on stands ready to go with the power supply right there, because anything short of that, and we're almost not going to use tube mics ever because it just takes longer to set up than anything else.
Yeah, and time is such an important thing, not just because like you need to do things quickly, but just when you're in the moment, or like if you have an artist or a client you're working with, or even just by yourself, like you want to just keep that workflow going. You know, you have an idea in mind. Okay, we'll just go to that instrument, try it. If it doesn't work, then try another instrument or whatever, and just keep things moving. It's important.
Right. So now what about, how, so what do you have, like 5, 6, 7 keyboards around you in
something like that? Sure. Yeah.
Right. So where are they? Are they on is a smart move to build sort of like keyboard shelves that are on the wall next to you? I mean, I guess everybody's room is a little
Everyone's room's different. Yeah. I basically,
but it's not necessarily like you don't necessarily have that much table space around you, right?
Yeah. So I've got my center desk with a Native Instruments 49 key controller. Next to that, I have Machine. Then there's a couple of the Roland Boutique instruments like on that same desk. And then to the left of me, I have a 2-tier stand. Soon probably is going to be upgraded to a 3-tiered stand.
Right, we'll see. Got that in Sonic.
Just got that in Sonic. So I got to figure out where to put that. And so I've got the Yamaha SK20. There's a Casio above that. Normally on the table next to it, I've got the Omnichord. And then I have a Fender Rhodes to the right. And then there's another 88 key Yamaha synth up there that I use for more piano MIDI stuff. If I'm actually like playing a piano track, then I want something that has more of like the weighted key feel. And so again, if I'm tracking real piano, I'll just go down the hall, and we've got a pretty cool upright that I love using in there. So
come over here, man.
Come over to your place, man. I'll do that.
Yeah. So you talked about like having the cables at the ready. So with a universal audio interface, for example, you might have a stereo pair that are just going into the back of a couple of inputs, but then the other end of the cable is over near you, just sort of coiled up, and you can just run it over to a particular
open.
synth.
Sometimes they're plugged in just kind of always to maybe a certain thing, maybe the SK20 or something I'll just kind of have stayed in. But yeah, for the most part, like just like the cable setup is just an easy swap. Like wherever you're going, you want to just kind of keep things easy.
Now, in a world of MIDI controllers, we're used to the idea of a lot of people are just like, I don't understand, what is MIDI again? Don't you just take this USB cable and plug it into the computer and now we're going, But of course, old school MIDI is, the old MIDI cables, the what is it, 9-pin or something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head. But is that an important aspect too, is you need to have some old school MIDI cables that are kind of coming and going so you can run in and out of these keyboards as well?
Totally. So the Native Instruments controller just runs off of a USB cable. So it's not actual pin MIDI. And so I do run MIDI. I do have a MIDI to USB like interface cable. And so that'll run to any synth that actually uses MIDI and not USB. And so that's also available just wherever,
Yeah. And I guess in that case, in your studio setting, it's probably more likely that you're going to say, oh, I need to get MIDI from Pro Tools to this keyboard so that I can have MIDI playback, what I programmed in MIDI playback this cool sound than going from the Jupiter to something else, right?
Right, yeah. And I mean, because you could do that. There's multiple ways to do it. You could play a part on your MIDI controller, have it sent MIDI out to the whatever analog synth you're using, and then record that back in. Or a lot of times, like I'll just record that sound from the analog synth via MIDI and then just send it back. If like, say if it's like a real intricate chord part that has like a rhythm that I want quantized, that you're not just like playing, that you want to feel more human or something, you want it to be like super robotic or like super tight, you could record it via MIDI, quantize it, then send it back. And so that'll be
I guess I can see that it probably makes sense to get in the habit of having MIDI coming and going from each keyboard, the analog keyboard. Right. Because, we're calling them analog. They might be digital inside.
Yeah, whatever. The hardware synths or keyboards. Yeah,
hardware synths. Because playing the keyboard inspires you to come up with a part and a sound and everything, but you might still want to be able to adjust it in Pro Tools and then re-record it in, or even like come up with an alternate sound and re-record it in. Yeah, and so the MIDI, is it often that when you play the thing you just played, when you have MIDI play it back through the same keyboard, that it's not quite the same, or is it usually closer than like, don't worry about it, it's pretty good?
Like before or after quantizing?
Not the quantizing part, just like I guess that would, there's no question of feel for quantizing anyway, right?
Yeah, because that's like, it becomes like another set. It becomes like that sort of tight sound that you maybe are after, maybe not. So yeah, I think if I play it and it's in MIDI, but I guess that's maybe a good question. Like if I'm not going to quantize it, like I don't normally put it in MIDI, then I'll just play it and record it. And then that's what it is.
Yeah. And I guess in Pro Tools, you'd have two tracks. You'd have a MIDI track that you're recording the MIDI onto. And right below that, you'd have the analog track, which is where the keyboard sound is going.
Yes.
So you could play it in, and then you've got your original performance, but then you can just playlist it and
you do a combo,
send the MIDI back and adjust things, do whatever you want.
Yep.
That stuff's fun. I mean,
it is fun.
That's the fun thing about using hardware synths is you get into more of those kind of experiments.
Yep. Definitely.
What about sonically? Let's say, rock stars are out there listening to this. They've got a cool keyboard, or somebody brings in a keyboard. How often is it like, just take the output of the keyboard, go straight into the computer, there's your sound, versus, do you want to encourage people to be running that keyboard through some stuff to create the cool sound on the way in?
Yeah. So I'm always a huge fan of effects. Like a lot of the music I do, I don't want just a normal sound, or at least like, whether it's like a lot of delay or reverb, like sometimes it's a super dry sound, but I love when sounds become something otherworldly. It just, you allow them to become more than, what they are. So I normally like to run stuff through like effects pedals, or, even if it's a plug-in effect, like just kind of like, it'll take you to another place, or you'll be inspired to play a different part. And so that stuff's all really important. And so,
do you ever find that just simply running a synth into a guitar amp is the solution for like your first reaction to a synth is like, what the hell? This is like, it's kind of cool, but it's
sterile or something.
Sterile, or it's cheesy sounding.
Yeah, I've done that a few times. Even just that sometimes instantly makes it something else.
Yeah.
It's actually funny you bring that up. I actually produced a song the other day where the acoustic piano in our booth, we mic'd up and ran that through a guitar amp and created this amazing, really cool like bass line on the piano just by running it through a guitar amp.
That's awesome.
It's the sound, man. Just it's stuff like that just really, it'll take you out of just, being, you're going to track a normal piano. Well, making something happen that is a little bit out of the ordinary.
Awesome. Well, let's take a break for a minute. We'll come back in for the jam session, the second half. And Rockstars, reminder, we're going to have links to stuff we're talking about in the show notes, a YouTube playlist with your records, and I'll try to remember to put in that Back in Black thing. what it feels like when inspiration hits and you want to capture your great song idea, but then the studio gets in the way and it's just no fun anymore? Wouldn't it feel awesome if you could simplify the process of producing your music from inspiration to final masterpiece? PreSonus Studio One is a powerful digital audio workstation that helps you compose your music with a complete collection of virtual instruments for keyboards and drums, MIDI tools for hip-hop, EDM, and film, a flexible sketch pad with chord charts and key recognition for songwriting and arranging, and classic effects pedals and amp simulators for guitar and bass. With 37 high-quality effects plugins, integrated Melodyne, and drag and drop flexibility, you can easily edit and polish your mixes. And Studio One is the only DAW with a built-in mastering studio so that you can take your record from writing to radio ready all in one place. Download your free version of Studio One Prime and get started now at PreSonus, wherever sound takes you. If you want to capture every nuance of a great performance in your studio, then you're going to need to start with a microphone that is crafted with great care and attention to detail. JZ Mics in Riga, Latvia designs amazing sounding microphones that are handcrafted with jeweler's precision to bring you incredible detail in your recordings. At the heart of JZ microphones is the unique Golden Drop capsule design, which uses a lighter, faster diaphragm that delivers great clarity and fidelity while avoiding distracting colorations and distortions. This is my voice right now on the new Amethyst microphone with Class A discrete amplifier circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and advanced built-in shock mount technology to bring an expensive sound to your studio for an affordable price. JZ offers a 5-year warranty, free shipping to the US, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, for a limited time, you can use the coupon code ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the Amethyst microphone at jzmic.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, and my guest today is Adam Bokesch, joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Dude, are you ready to rock?
Oh, yeah.
Or jam, rather.
Let's jam. Let's jam.
I've been poked fun at a little bit for having all this, over-the-topness, but you know what? It makes it fun, man.
Hey, man, it makes for a good time.
Why would we make records and want to do rock and roll if we didn't want to be over the top?
Yeah, I don't know.
We all want stage names. All right, cool, man. So Milktooth is a band that you had worked with, and we've got one of the examples in the YouTube playlist. It's got killer sounding drums.
Yeah.
And as a drummer, as somebody who also understands the power of synths and samples and programming, I wanted to say, how did you get that sound, and what to you are some fun favorite ways to both record drums, get explosive snares, mix and match with programmed stuff?
Yep.
Just run with any of those topics.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot in there. Milktooth is a band that I still work with. We're releasing some music. I think the track you're referring to is All You Ghosts, and that song just came out a few weeks ago. But Milktooth is a band that we actually played with them since, probably 2011 or so is when I joined the band. And it's been loads of fun. They're some of my best friends, and we're not touring anymore, but like I said, we're still releasing some music. And so yeah, in terms of the drum sounds, the Milktooth sound has always been extremely aggressive. It's that kind of indie rock. The drums need to be in your face.
Right, snares
huge sounds. And so that record was co-produced between all of us. The drums were recorded by Bobby, but yeah, the snare sound specifically, it's a mix between it was a live drum take, but it was a mix between live drums and the Linn drum samples.
Yeah, fucking Linn drum, man, it's so great.
Yep. So that's how we got those sounds, and it just has that, like the punch comes from the Linn drum.
Now, do you have a Linn drum yourself?
I don't have an original. No.
You guys have one at the studio though that you can.
No.
Hand on nice.
All just samples.
Sample, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately not. I think that would be a fun drum machine to have. If I did get into some of the old drum machines, I probably would go for the Oberheim OBX Linn drum, and probably a 909.
Yeah.
So those would be like,
I hate to hear it, but we had all those when I was making records with these bands.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's something special. It's, I haven't even really had much time with them, but they're valuable, sought after now. And
well, the thing that you trade, so if you want to get the analog drum machines and like create your own, the thing that you trade against doing it, the modern way where you've got machine and you're programming is that you do have the original sound source,
right?
But you don't have really any of that flexibility for programming.
Sure.
It becomes very difficult to get it to do what you want it to do.
Because you'll probably end up sampling.
Yeah, a lot of times you just end up like you put something in, then you just sample it, and now it's back in machine.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, the things that you needed to do to get it to sound awesome coming out of the drum machine to create the sample, where you had to compress it and EQ it and add some,
right?
Having those people who've already done it for you with the sample packs is pretty great.
Yeah. I never really feel, I never really feel kind of limitations with machine. If anything, I feel a really, really good connection with what I could do with samples and drum machines within that program and controller. So.
When you're using drum machines or when you're using outboard synths to bring sounds in, have you ever messed around with like, you let yourself be in experiment mode where you're screwing up sounds and you're going through pedals? I guess I'll just describe what we used to do, and I want to hear your, what a version is for you or what a take is.
Yep.
I got in the habit of just going like, I'm just going to roll the song from top to bottom and record everything I do because I'll stumble on some freaky sound and and then I'll make that into a sample and cut and paste it or do whatever.
Right.
Because a lot of times when you're messing with guitar pedals and synths and all this stuff, you don't have that much control. You can't be like, and also like, you're not going to be like, oh, I remember I really liked what I was doing back in verse 1 better than what I'm doing now in the third chorus where I turned all the knobs.
Yep.
And they're like, how do I go back to that setting in verse 1?
That's the beauty of exploration, like you've kind of made it to this new spot. And so, I've definitely found myself there where like, you're like, you moved on and that verse 1 sound is gone, but maybe you just take that sound and then use that and just, make something out of it.
Just copy paste it now that it's in Pro Tools. Yeah.
So
any other tips for that kind of, just the integration of experimenting, but also being able to use a great sound or capture it and make it something that you decided upon in the end?
Yeah, I think I find myself like being okay with mistakes. You know what I mean? I think that's a beautiful thing, just allowing whatever happens to happen. And then, you can utilize what you have, like even if it's not working in a certain spot, like just being able to like grab that sound and put it where you need to via Pro Tools or whatever, like that, just like be okay with like utilizing that. And so it's never been a problem for me. I've been able to really make good use of that.
Nice. Well, when you're in the digital world, of course, you can always save a preset of something and then move on and screw it all up and come back to that preset.
Yeah.
But recording stuff in, because if you're trying to record, if you're like, ooh, this might be the sound, and then you're like, I got to record 3.5 minutes of the entire song in real time before I even turn a knob and come back and playlist it, like, you'll never get anything done that way.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you're real close and you're certain of it, that's one thing. But when you're just in the searching stage, it's interesting. It's definitely kind of useful to record it onto a track and then go back through and listen. And I used to do things like I'd have it record on a track, then have another track below it. And when I found something I liked, I'd just chop it and pull it down to the next track below.
Sure.
I guess Target Comp playlist now in Pro Tools.
I was going to say that's a great way. Just playlisting, like if you do a few multiple takes when you're messing with stuff, then that'll like give you the ability to go through and, use whatever, take 1 here, take 2 here. And the new feature is instead of having to look in like playlist view where you have a drop down box of, a million like takes, like you're able to
Mexican blanket in front of you of all these colors.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it's become a little bit more intuitive now. And so, it's been a game changer having that new option. So,
yeah. All right, cool. The drum sounds. Let's go back to that for a sec. The explosive snare. What are some other things that help a snare sound explosive when you're doing it? Maybe maybe, are we talking about like there was a live snare, there's this one Lynn sample, and maybe you don't need much more than that, but then it's just about how you treat it in the mix? Or should we be exploring like, 10 different snare samples all stacked on top of each other?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that world?
Well, I know a ton of pop music does do a lot of snare layering, and that's kind of where they create that sound where like the snare will have one like super deep sound that's pitch shift down, and then there's the snappy part, and then there's the noise tail, and then it's layered with like a tom sound. And I do that a lot. Like I love creating a snare out of.
Well, I like that idea, putting a tom on top of the snare too.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like I really like to, with the snare sample, like I'll have like a digital tom sound that maybe has some bend to it. So it pitch drops. And so it kind of creates that, if you're doing pop snares or like electronic snares, like it kind of creates some motion. So you'll have a little bit of a pitch fall, maybe like a real snare would have. And so that kind of create this like little snare monster out of a few different sounds. And
what do you do with your snare monster? Do you try and turn that into an individual sample back in Machine as quickly as you can? Or do you let there be 10 tracks through your production?
Normally I'll leave it tracked out. Normally I like doing it that way, unless you're performing on Machine, like if you're trying to play a groove on Machine. But normally like I'll play the groove first and then kind of maybe add to that sound after.
Just beef it up until you get there.
Yeah. So sometimes it takes one sound. Like there's a new Daybreaks track that we're working on right now, and this is I'm excited to share this song. It probably will be out in a couple months, but we had drums booked one day, but the live room got double booked, so we had to track drums in the tracking room, which is a lot deader. We just brought in a kick and snare, 2 mics, just kick mic, snare mic, and it's in the song. There's no samples on it. It's just the one snare with I think 3 or 4 instances of the AMS reverb, and it's one of the most massive drum snare sounds that we've gotten, and it's just one microphone but with like 4 instances of reverb.
Tell us about the AMS reverb. Is that a plugin, or is that the real? Do you guys have the real thing?
Yeah, no. So it's just the UAD plugin, but yeah, it's a really incredible reverb. So I wish I had some hardware version.
I can't remember if it was the reverb, but one of those, the hardware units actually acted as a sampler too. And when Ben Gross was mixing a record for us, that's what he was using as the sampler to play back the kick and drum samples that would get mixed into the session.
Yep.
Because apparently it was faster than most other sample playback things, like the Wendell was with the carts or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm getting old school with it now. Of course, you've just got Trigger and
Trigger is a great tool and all that stuff. Yeah,
but I mean, Trigger is a place where I run into a real question about the layering, because I'm like, I start putting Trigger in, and usually I'm not trying to make that the featured sound. I'm trying to like boost up my analog drums.
Right. Yep.
And then it's you get caught in a downward spiral where you add one snare sound and you're like, well, let me unmute this one. Well, let me fill up all 8 slots and unmute them all a little bit. Well, what does that sound like? And it feels like sometimes you convince yourself that it's helping, but then if you solo it, you're like, God, that sounds terrible, that soloed sample. So it can be kind of a tricky thing.
There's this kind of part of you that feels like, the more just like snare sample 1, snare sample 2, 3, however many like you layer on, you're going to get a thicker, bigger snare sound. And that's not necessarily all the way true. And I think that's kind of what goes back to me like saying, like, sometimes I'll have there's one snare sound, but then there's like the lower tom sound, and then there's like the noise track. It's kind of like, it's almost like, you kind of create this like palette. You're not just like stacking this kind of similar sound on top of each other.
Right. Yeah. And they start competing, and
exactly. You don't
without
want that,
realizing it. You've got like phase cancellation going out between sounds, and now you're actually killing off the sound that might have been good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about synths. You've got all these cool synths. Sorry, Rockstars. We already talked about synths. I know, but hold on. Next stage.
Keep talking about it.
You've got all these cool synth sounds. You captured them. Now they're in your Pro Tools session. Now, what are some things that are like helpful tips about like, here's what you could do to that synth sound in Pro Tools to make it, kind of enhance it a little bit more in your mix or in your production?
Well, one plugin that comes to mind is it's just a stock Pro Tools plugin, Lo-Fi. It's probably one of my, I guess you could say, like, I don't know if it's secret, but it's a weapon,
Yeah.
I really feel like that plugin goes a long way. Like there's, I love contrast in production. Like I really love very like dark, swimmy sounds mixed with like cutting like bright vocals or cutting bright synth, like whatever textures you kind of have. Like I love like kind of creating this sort of like overview of sounds. And I feel like lo-fi does a really cool job of, capturing some of those.
Yeah.
And so whether it's just sample degrading, you could also do technically if you filter cut off things or sounds, that kind of gives you that same sort of concept, but lo-fi kind of has a character to it that when you're
you get
actually
all the aliasing.
when you kind of degrade that sample a little bit, it kind of creates this, maybe another worldly sort of sound. Like if you're wanting to like cut the highs out of something, like instead of just doing a cutoff, I'll try lo-fi and see what that does. And then
what are the unexpected things that you've put lo-fi on and you've been like, well, that's awesome. I didn't expect it to sound awesome on that instrument. You put it on the lead vocal ever?
I've done a few vocals. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've done it on like the lead vocal, but definitely some vocals. And that definitely creates this, like you're kind of underwater sort of sound, like the distortion kind of mixed with that sample degrading, like kind of creates a really cool texture. But I would say the most surprising instrument that I've used lo-fi on that kind of has stuck with me, and I use it on a lot of songs, is my friend. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was doing a record with a buddy of mine, and he brought over his grandpa's minnow pail. It's
his what? Is that like a
I don't know if you could call this an instrument. It's a fishing bucket from like the late
minnow pail.
Minnow pail. Probably the 40s ish or so. I mean, it's pretty. It's been through a lot, and so I've had that since then in the studio, and I find it to be a really unique instrument for replacing hi-hats or shakers or even snare drum.
Does it still have the sound of the echo of slapping tails?
There's something swimming around in there. I don't know what it is, but maybe one day I'll find
gasps.
out. But yeah, so one song I put I didn't want it to have the like clarity it has. Like it sounds like this kind of metal, almost hi-hat-ish sort of sound. And so I tried putting lo-fi on it, and I set the high pass. After lo-fi, I did a little bit of high pass so that there wasn't this rumble to it. It kind of created this, otherworldly sort of sound that was still percussive, but it wasn't too high or harsh or something. And then added a little bit of the noise to it. And it was magic. It was something that like both myself and the artists in the room were just like, that's the percussion for the song.
And that was originally a minnow pail?
It was originally a minnow pail.
Nice.
Played with brushes.
So another guest on the show, Chris James, one of his tips that has stuck with me for some reason is to use lo-fi on any instrument, maybe even on the 2 mix, and you just put it on there and you do a 0.1% distortion. And it's like this just little...
It's that heat.
Yeah, it's just that little bit of heat, that little vibe lifter that isn't like really changing the sound where you'd be like, oh, this is affected, but it just makes it sound.
Yeah, it's a wonderful plugin. I can't use it enough.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. During the height of record making, Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, Ardent Studios, and the New York City record plant all turned to one company to build their consoles. That company is now Spectra 1964, carried on today through Bill Cheney and Jim Romney. The extremely stable, high-speed circuit design of the 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and linear output irrespective of transient audio peaks, giving you cleaner, punchier, dynamic recordings. Spectra 1964 brings you the sound of ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, King Crimson, John Lennon, and so many more. Created by the missile engineers who were central in rolling out the systems that protected the free world for over half a century, Spectra 1964 literally brings rocket science to your studio. With the STX 600 mic pre with built-in complementer, full-frequency passive BBDI, and C610 dedicated complementer, start making records that last a lifetime at Spectra1964.com. Let's talk about you putting out your own record, because that's another thing you do. And, well, you choose. You want to talk about putting on your record next, or you want to talk about doing composition for film and stuff like that? Because you've had a lot of experience with that.
You know, it's one and the same, honestly. So it'll cover both grounds. So I initially started writing music for film probably in 2005, when just a friend of mine was trying to get into film stuff and made a quirky film and asked me to do the music for it. And of course I said yes, just because like that sounds awesome and fun. And so yeah, I tried my hand at it, and the music maybe wasn't great, but it got me into learning how music and sound pairs with visual film. And I, ever since then, I've just absolutely loved it. And so I, over the years, I've done a few film compositions. I think I have 9 or 10 now under my belt. And so my artist album that I put out earlier this year, the first time I've released anything under my name, it all was kind of birthed out of writing music for film. And I just kind of put it together and said, man, this is something that I should probably look into pursuing as my own like artist career. Cause I love writing music for film, and people ask to listen to it, you know, so I would just have to send them like links to the songs or something. And so I decided like, I want to simultaneously write music for film and TV and utilize that music as my own artist name. And so a lot of the songs off of my record were parts of a film score that I did. Nice. A few songs weren't, like they were written just as one-off songs, but those ended up being licensed for a few, you know, film and TV things. And so it all kind of blends together. And I really love that aspect of what I do.
Anything you want to share about the process of actually releasing your own record? Was it a big deal as far as being stressful, the releasing process, or is it kind of easy? You just pick a service to upload it all, and then
sure.
You know, is it terribly important to go through some, like, did you have to hire a radio promoter or anything like that? I'm guessing not for film scoring.
Yeah, so the thing I think what I do is I worked with 1RPM. That was the distribution company that put it out, and they helped me through it. They did a great job. I think one of the major things for me is like, I just don't want to put a lot of pressure on my music. Like I write for film, and I write, like, I want the music to be part of visual art. And so if people want to listen to it elsewhere, then that's great. And so I don't feel the need to like pressure myself to like, oh, I need to have this huge release, you know, thing out of it. I mean, obviously like I want to keep pursuing it and push it and give it what it deserves. But I don't want there to be too much pressure on myself.
Yeah, too much pressure is like the opposite of the advice we got from Bruce at the beginning. That'll just cause you to not do anything.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to think about the release too much, because especially nowadays, like where we live in such like a content-driven world, like you release music and then, you know, everyone listens to it that day or the next day, and then they're gonna move on to the next thing. And so, which, I mean, I guess you could see it both ways. Like that's a hard reality to live in as a musician, because you feel like maybe a little undervalued, or you don't feel like your music's going to get the attention it deserves. But it also kind of helps you just keep pursuing what you love and just keep making more music, and you're just going to keep getting better. So
I think for me, it's maybe a good fit because I'm short attention span composing anyway. So,
yeah,
if you can match the pace of the listening, then maybe you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Tell us what sounds you're excited about creating next in the studio. What sonically, what are you like, man, I sure would love to get this kind of sound.
Love it. Yeah. Well, so the band that I play with and produce, the Daybreaks, we've got a lot of new music coming out in 2020, and so I'm super, super excited about where we've been going and the sounds that we've been exploring. I feel like I've really kind of gone down a black hole of getting back to the origin of a lot of these synthesizers and sounds, like from the early, pretty much throughout the 80s, like a lot of where these synthesizers were like being created and like those sounds. And so that's definitely been a huge part. I want to take those sounds and pair them with new modern pop production methods and see what comes out of them. And so
wavetables, dude, serum.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I want to keep exploring. I want to just keep on moving with things. So yeah.
One of the things that Joe Baldrich talked about on this podcast, early episode, man, I need to get Joe back on too.
Yep.
Is he pointed out an interesting thing about the intensity of records and just like the how volume packed and how harmonically packed records are since we've entered the age of computer making music, where you've got like, you can have all these synths on it and all kinds of stuff. And that always just stuck with me. I don't know if I have a point to this other than just remind us that it's one of the things that really can tempt us about working with synths and programming is it allows you to take advantage of a lot of sonic real estate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you have real control. Like you can have a sound just take over the world and be totally silent and gone in the next moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty hip.
Yep.
All right. So let's jump to our closing jam session questions. When you started out with recording and everything, what do you feel like was holding you back?
Well, so that kind of question, man, I feel like I started out recording with, other than the TAG, I guess that's technically the first thing. But when I really started getting into it, I had a mini disc recorder. And so that was,
I remember that era.
This was probably, this is when I like actually started using a DAW. I was using, I think it was like Sony Acid or something, and
I remember that too.
Yeah. And so
isn't that what Fruity Loops is now, or
maybe, that sounds right. But yes. So that's where I got started with this all. And I don't necessarily want to say that it held me back, but it was like I would run the output of a click track out of the computer and just record on the mini disc player with that microphone, because that was the only microphone I had to utilize with this thing. And then I would dump it like into Acid and then play that back and then record a separate file and just kind of keep like layering. So I wasn't recording directly into the program. I was just kind of using it as like a medium. And I mean, it just took forever. It was just,
probably sounded really cool because of like it's a little out of sync from everything.
Yeah, like it would just, it was kind of a thing. And so, it was equally my start to like really getting to know that world. And also just like, I look back and I'm just like, the time I wasted doing things with that thing.
That's how I feel about the many times we watched our White Tower computer, the early Mac, starting up and restarting because Pro Tools was not working.
Yeah, it's so fun. But so yeah, technically that there's a lot of stuff. This goes with even when I finished college here in Nashville, like I. Not to get into a ton of it, but like, I decided to go to a pretty expensive private school. And so like you have a lot of student debt. And so that, that kind of creates this, not like, this is aside from technical recording setbacks. This is like more like life things like, okay, so how do I pursue music full time? How do I pursue being a full-time engineer when I have to pay not just for like my own living, but just to like, pay this.
How often were you like, man, if I only just spent all that money on a bunch of those vintage synths back before they were so expensive?
I know I would probably be in a better position. But yeah, I mean, that's the question. It's like, do you go to school for music, and do you go to school for audio engineering? Like, is that like, it's a huge question, and I look, people ask me like, do you value your Belmont experience or whatever? And yes, I do, but it also, like, it set me back. It did. It was really difficult. Like, I've been out of college for over 10 years now. And I feel like I'm just now like getting my head above water.
I think it took me a decade to pay off a $10,000 college loan.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a huge conversation to have. And so I think that's honestly probably, in terms of my career as a producer, engineer, musician, just having to navigate like financial decisions and all of that, I mean, has been huge. So,
yeah. Well, I imagine that the college experience did introduce you to a lot of people that probably stayed
of course,
on your path,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's where, to me, that was the huge value of
It's
it.
the value. It
was
is.
being in a community of peers who were we all cared about the same thing.
Right.
That's what we are here recording Studio Rockstars.
Exactly. So yeah, there's definitely two sides to it, but yeah. Yeah.
All right, dig it. So some of the best advice you remember receiving.
The best advice. Well, I'm gonna quote Bobby Holland on this one, but technically, I think this is so huge. Whenever you're recording or working with a band or with an artist, like, just make sure the 2 mix is good. You want to hear what you're doing and what music you're making. So just, yeah, I think that was a huge thing for me. Just like when you're listening back to the song you're creating, like, like make sure that you're like actually making it sound good in the room. And when you're listening back and the parts that you're playing on top of it, because if you can't hear what else is going on, like, how are you expected to interact with that production?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because there is a balancing act there, because sometimes what you might want to do at the mix stage is get everything super hot and everything. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's not the easiest thing to overdub to, because it's like,
yeah,
I don't know, just because sometimes, like, you put on headphones out in the control room and it's like, you're trying to sing to something that's like insane, and you're like, well, I don't know where I fit.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think that's great, because if you make it sound like an inspiring record, then it inspires you to keep doing whatever you're going to do to it.
It's such an important thing. And I mean, even down to like the details of, like, maybe you played this one part earlier on in the production like a week ago, and you came back, and like, if you don't really hear how that's interacting, maybe you start creating this new part, and then you're overlapping what that was saying.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've killed a great thing.
Yeah. And
I've layered something on. Did you make that the loudest thing so you can work on it? And then you come back and you're like, oh man, I couldn't even hear that other stuff.
Yeah.
Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Want to start mastering your own records? Rockstars of Mastering walks you through exactly how I mastered my own record using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. Want to learn how to create a mix that doesn't suck but rocks instead? At Mixmaster Bundle, I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins so that you can have punchy, powerful drums, guitars that rock, bass you can feel, and a mix that is in your face. Plus, it's totally free as my way of saying thanks for listening. Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and look for the clickable link in the show notes below. Give us yet another recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the Rockstars can use on their next session today. Anything fun, whatever you got in mind.
I would say, again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's been a huge thing for me. Like, even if it's like a full-on failure or whatever it is, like, just, I find myself like, I'll make a mistake, and sometimes that leads you to creating something really cool.
Yeah, totally. I think our best stuff comes out of our mistakes. you might have to like recover from your mistake, and that's what really is exciting in the end.
I guess I don't mean like necessarily like playing a bad take. Like there's a difference between that and like doing something that you weren't intentionally meaning to do. I guess those are separate things. But
well, and like a really inspired take is usually it can often be something that is right on the edge of control.
Sure.
And therefore, when the mistake happens, it helps you recognize that like you're right there. You're just you're reaching for something that you can barely get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if it was too easy to get to it, it's like, whatever. It didn't look hard.
Yeah.
All right. How about a hardware tool? Something maybe that you love having on sessions, or you're just kind of excited about right now? It's probably your Ensoniq EPS.
I know. I was going to say.
And I seem to remember when I was over there, you guys. Oh, maybe Bobby had given it to somebody else, but it was this pedal from the Juno 109. It was like the chorus only or something.
Oh, so it's the Juno. Right? Yeah, I think it was TC Electronics. Like I think it was them. They just came out with like the Juno chorus, like 1 and 2. Like it's a simple like on-off button. Like there's no other options. Like that's all you get is just, the chorus 1 and 2. And so, that plugin, I think there's like 3 or 4 of those floating around.
But
it
wasn't even a plugin. It was a guitar pedal.
Guitar
right?
pedal. Yeah. I mean, sorry, not a plugin. The guitar pedal. So that thing's super, super cool. So
cool. Anything for you though? And I mean, I know I threw that one out there.
I'm really digging the Ensoniq. I mean, I just got it yesterday, but we'll see. There's something about
it's a sampler too, right?
It's a sampler, yeah. And so all of the sounds are stored on external floppy disks, and so it's there's a little bit of a learning curve in terms of even how to get the thing to make some noise. Like
you don't get much sample time when you sample on it, right?
I think it's like a second and a half or something. Like, I mean, it's not much, so you don't really get a ton of sample time, but yeah, maybe the next time I come back, we'll talk more about it once I've really dug into it.
All right, dig it. How about anything exciting in software world? Any new stuff that you're like, oh, this is fun?
I'd say honestly, a lot of the Acoustica plugins are something that I've been really getting into. They really bring a new sound and texture. And they're new to me. I just started getting them a couple months ago. So I've really loved the limitations with the with the RAM that you get. Like you don't really get to use a ton of them, and so they just kind of feel a little bit special.
Right.
But yeah, I think those have been really, really fun. A really cool addition to the studio.
All right, cool. I'll jump to this one. Share an organizational tip. So you talked about the importance of staying organized in the studio. What do you want to share, whether it's, something to do physically in your studio or whether it's some cool online thing?
Yeah.
We didn't even get to the topic of if you're going to have drum samples and synth sounds and patches, how do you even keep track of all this stuff so that you can go right for a good thing when you need it?
Right. Well, I mean, again, we could talk about that sort of organization. There's a company that I work for. We use Smartsheet to go between each other with scheduling vocalists for doing sessions. And so,
what's Smartsheet? Is that an app or something?
So I think there's an app. I just use it on my computer, just log in. But it's basically like an interactive Excel sort of spreadsheet. But like you can do, basically we have it laid out of like what the session is, who the singer is that needs booked. They'll say the due date. And then I can basically put in my session dates that I have. They can write any notes if they have anything specific that they're looking for, like, they need these words to be different or whatever, So it's like a really good interactive way that I'm not emailing, I'm not texting. I don't have to go through like a lot of, I'm not getting emailed an Excel spreadsheet or something. Like it's just instantly updated. And when I upload, like I just check the box when it's uploaded and then it goes away. Like it's very like kind of intuitive, and it keeps our working relationship, moving.
And is this something that you guys are using between all these studio owners at Pentaveret where you're collaborating on projects, or is this something that you would work with a particular client that maybe you're doing a lot of work with or something?
Yeah, you could use it for any of those. I mainly use it just between the company that I have. Most of the Pentaveret stuff is maybe a little less like I guess, a little less organized than that. But I mean, it's maybe a little bit more personal too.
Right. Everybody's doing their own thing, and sometimes you're collaborating.
Yeah. Most of the sessions that like, me and Brad or me and Bobby do or whatever, like it's a little bit more organic. And so I don't necessarily have to have it to be that like organized out.
Right.
And so, but it's been a great little tool just for organizing sessions.
I love staying organized when I can. I'm like the worst culprit. People call me a hoarder sometimes, if you see my studio or my basement, but I promise I'm trying and I'm getting organized in lots of other places.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes you just put a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
But the more organized things get, the better I feel about it and the happier I am. And there's so much you could be accomplishing if you weren't wasting time going back and forth on something that could just be log into a website, like you said, or just say yes or no and be done.
Yeah, it's easy. It keeps things moving.
Yeah.
So
that you don't necessarily want to take that approach when you're trying to interact emotionally with the singer on the mic. And those are good times to take a little extra time and just kind of, really listen and really share some feedback.
Yeah.
And,
tracking,
don't be too short.
Tracking vocals and producing vocals and working with vocalists, a lot of times that's another art form. That's been something that I've been really, really loving to like learn and keep on, following that path. And, that's another whole thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, dig it, man. All right. So final question here. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You're going to go back and find young Adam, who's just playing his 2-year-old drum kit. Sorry, the drum kit's not 2, you're 2. Or wherever you want to go back and tap yourself on the shoulder and say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. If you could go back and give yourself one bit of advice, what would it be?
So, I would say I would love to tell myself to learn and practice piano more. I think that's a huge thing for me. And, because I've seen what sticking with drums has done. And, I'm happy with where I am with playing piano, but I feel like I would have loved to tell myself like, hey, Adam, like you're going to want this early on. Like you're going to use this. It's going to help you with just knowing music more, knowing how to play with other musicians better. Like it took me a long time to kind of get to that point to realize.
Which part of your life are you pointing to? You're pointing to like, when
I was like 4 or 5 years old,
school, taking lessons.
Yeah.
So what do you imagine in your mind those lessons would look like that would have been useful? Because I mean, piano lessons can be a lot of things, and they could just be like, just play your scales over and over again, or maybe it could be something totally different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, drums for me, I felt so passionate about them. Like I always just loved them. Like my dad's like VHS tape of me getting my drum kit when I was 2 was hilarious. That's because awesome. It's like I didn't want to open any other presents from other family members. You know what I mean? Like they had to move it upstairs, and I was like throwing a fit. And so like, again, I don't have a regret about my piano practicing. I mean, I think it's just more of like, I just realized how important that is, and so. Well,
I mean, if you had focused on the piano, you would have just been like, here, you'd be sitting here right now today going, you got to play more drums. That would have been your advice to yourself.
It's just a combo, I guess. Yeah, just like doing both of them, just knowing that it's one and the same. I think that's what I realize now, that like any instrument, it's all creating music, whether you're playing drums, playing piano, playing serum, playing hardware synth, like you're creating music. And so, well,
the nice thing about piano is it kind of, there's not much, well, first of all, piano became the instrument of the computer.
Right.
Period.
Sure.
Drop the mic. It is it's how you interface if you're going to make computer music.
Right.
I mean, of course, they started putting drum pads on the digital keyboards. I guess
that's one way to do it, but yes.
But still, ultimately,
it's the most accessible way.
It wasn't the guitar that became the interface, even though that does exist. But also, piano is a really great way to visually learn and understand and see, how the relationship of music and harmony and notes going together. And, you can see where a bass lives and where a vocal melody lives and where a chord lives and stuff like that. And that's trickier to do on guitars and stuff.
Right.
So awesome, dude. Well, thanks so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us.
It's amazing. Yep.
Let the Rockstars know where they can go find you online. How do they go learn more about your music, see your studio, all this stuff?
Sure. So my website is pentaveret.studios.com. My profile is up there, all the things about me. I also have my music on iTunes, just under my artist name, just Adam Bokesch. And then also up on a licensing company's website, MusicBed. Most of all of my music is up there if it's not on iTunes. And so those are the 3 best spots to find my stuff.
Awesome. Well, Rockstar, as a reminder, of course, I'll have links to stuff we're talking about, including Pentaveret, and you can just click through right in the show notes. Just go to the blog post. If you're listening on your mobile device or on the computer or whatever, it's right there in the notes, in the blog post. So click it. We'll see you guys in the next episode. And Adam, thanks for being on the show with us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
We'll see you around the studio. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who helped make this episode possible. OWC, Whisper Room, Spectra 1964, PreSonus Studio One, JZ Microphones, United Plugins bringing you Hyperspace, Royal Compressor, Fire Cobra, and Front DAW, and Audio Movers, helping stream high-quality audio directly from your studio. You will find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.